Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a revolution that kicked off in 750 CE, a revolution that literally forged the foundations of our modern world. We're talking about the Abbasid Caliphate. We're going to explore how an era remembered as the absolute pinnacle of science, art, and culture actually clawed its way to power through ruthless ambition, and how the seeds of its own destruction were planted at the exact same time.
Now here's one of history's greatest paradoxes. How exactly did a bloody, color-coded revolution birth the world's greatest era of science? We always tend to think of golden ages as these eras of uninterrupted peace and harmony, right? But the Abbasid Golden Age emerged straight from the ashes of a devastating civil war. It was a war defined by intense propaganda, secret plots, and quite literally a clash of colors on the battlefield.
But every golden age seems to have a fatal flaw. And we'll soon see what happens when a mighty empire tries to solve its political paranoia by importing an elite army of orphaned slave soldiers from the Central Asian steppes. It was supposed to be a practical military solution, but it eventually spiraled completely out of control. Before we get into the fragmentation of this empire, though, we need to understand how they seized power in the first place.
So, to really understand their fall, we have to see their rise. The Abbasids overthrew the reigning Umayyad dynasty through what was basically a masterclass in weaponizing resentment and medieval branding. You see, the Umayyads, who were based over in Damascus, had this really obvious preference for Arab Muslims. They practically shut non-Arabs, like the Persians, entirely out of power. Taking full advantage of this weakness, the Abbasid movement adopted stark black banners for their apocalyptic revolution. It was a dramatic, intentional contrast to the white banners of the Umayyads, signaling a brand new, inclusive direction.
Just look at the sheer geographic sweep of this movement right here. It was led by a daring, charismatic operative named Abu Muslim. Starting way out east in Khorasan, he recruited an army dressed entirely in black. They even dyed their weapons black. This sweeping campaign culminated in a massive showdown at the Great Zab River in Iraq in 750 CE, where the men in black completely wiped out the Umayyad emperor's forces.
But here's the twist. The new Abbasid leadership? They really didn't like sharing the glory or the power. The new caliph, Safa, was the absolute master of the medieval betrayal, the velvet glove over the iron fist. He famously thanked his top general, Abu Muslim, for his selfless service one day, and literally had his bodyguard slit Abu Muslim's throat the very next night. Safat was so incredibly ruthless in hunting down his rivals that his successors actually discovered a secret underground vault in his palace, filled entirely with the decomposing corpses of his captured enemies.
All right, moving on to building Baghdad from scratch. So with their rivals permanently out of the picture, the Abbasids shifted the entire world's center of gravity. They didn't just take over the old capital. Instead, in 762 CE, Caliph al-Mansur constructed Baghdad completely from scratch. He built it perfectly round, strategically wedged right between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. This wasn't just great for farming, it made Baghdad the prime hub on the overland trade routes between Europe and Asia. We're talking ivory, soap, honey, diamonds, and silk flowing through its immense streets. Imagine a medieval metropolis with nearly 2 million inhabitants and 10,000 bathhouses. This staggering, unbelievable wealth became the legendary setting for the tales of the Arabian Nights.
And all of this wealth fueled what has to be the ultimate historical butterfly effect, a border skirmish that actually led to a revolution in human knowledge. In 751 CE, the Abbasids fought the Tang dynasty at the Battle of Talas. The Chinese had fiercely guarded the secret of papermaking for years, but the victorious Abbasids captured Chinese papermakers as prisoners of war. Boom! They immediately set up Arab paper mills. This shifted paper from being a rare, elite luxury to a mass-produced commodity. Almost overnight, books became accessible to the masses. When you look at the sheer architectural splendor of the Abbasid palace, you really get a feel for the era. These stunning walls housed incredibly wealthy elites who used their vast resources to sponsor what became known as the translation movement. They didn't just want material wealth, They had this deep, practical thirst for medical knowledge and a genuine desire to preserve the works of ancient Greece, like the philosophies of Aristotle. At the absolute heart of this movement was the House of Wisdom. Established by Caliphs Harun al-Rashid and al-Ma'mun, this place was essentially the medieval equivalent of a world-class think tank. It was an incredible hub of diversity. You had Muslims, Christians, and Jews working side by side, peacefully translating Greek, Syriac, and Persian texts into Arabic, and in the process creating a massive, comprehensive library of human knowledge. But here's the kicker.
They didn't just translate ancient knowledge, they totally revolutionized it. Arab and Persian scholars forged massive new advances. A Persian mathematician named Al-Khwarizmi literally invented algebra. That gives us the root of the word algorithm, the very math that powers our digital lives and the device you're watching this on right now. The brilliant Dr. Avicenna wrote the Canon of Medicine, a text so advanced it helped physicians diagnose dangerous diseases like cancer. And Ibn al-Haytham explained how the human eye works and invented the first camera obscura. This is the exact scholarship that would ultimately pass down and enlighten Europe.
Which brings us to the splintering: slaves, sex, and fragmentation.
Because while the science was absolutely thriving, the politics behind the scenes were decaying fast. Maintaining a massive empire from North Africa all the way to the borders of India required absolute control. So, the isolated caliphs made a fateful and highly ironic decision. They started purchasing elite Turkish slave soldiers, known as Mamluks, from the Central Asian steppes. Raised from childhood in military camps with no memory of their families, their only allegiance was to their commanders. The Abbasids thought they had bought the ultimate loyal bodyguards, but talk about a backfire. These Mamluks soon realized that they possessed the actual physical power. Before long, they were the ones issuing orders from behind the caliph's throne.
As the caliphs basically turned into puppets to their own bodyguards, the timeline of this once mighty empire descends into total geopolitical chaos. The centralized empire fractured as independent provinces broke away. By 868, the Tulunids took Egypt. In 869, a massive revolt of Zanj, African slaves, erupted in lower Iraq. By 909, the Fatimids declared their own rule in North Africa. And by 945, the Buyids, a Persian dynasty, actually marched right in and took control of Baghdad itself. And you can clearly see the physical reality of the splintering right here. The once unified Islamic world fractured into three competing caliphates. The remnants of the Umayyads over in Spain, the Abbasids holding on in the east, and the new Fatimid Caliphate dominating the center. You can really see how Egypt, under the Fatimids, began massively outshining Baghdad. I mean, the Fatimids even built the world's first university, Al-Azhar in Cairo, and it's actually still operating today.
As if things weren't chaotic enough, enter a ruthless genius named Hassan Sabbah. He recognized these fracturing power structures and decided to take over a completely unapproachable mountain fortress in Iran called Alamut, famously known as the Eagle's Nest. From there, he recruited a deeply dedicated sect known as the Cult of the Assassins. Their entire purpose? To level the rich, empower the meek, and completely unravel the established order by methodically assassinating key political and religious leaders across the fractured empire.
So looking back at this grand, chaotic timeline, we really have to step back and ask ourselves, without a dynasty born in blood, sustained by paranoia, and ultimately fragmented by assassins, without the brutal, cutthroat politics that ironically birthed the world's greatest center of learning, where would modern science even be today? It's a huge, fascinating paradox to leave you with. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer of the Abbasid Caliphate.